Ever wonder what it takes to conquer an entire country? A land sprawling with fierce, independent tribes? Today, we're rediving into the story of one of history's most audacious campaigns, Julius Caesar's conquest of Gaul. This wasn't just a series of battles. It was a masterclass in strategy, engineering, and sheer, unrelenting ambition that forever changed the course of European history. We're talking about a conflict that lasted nearly a decade, involved millions of people, and forged a legend of a man who would become a god in the eyes of his people. So, buckle up as we march with the legions into the wild heart of ancient France. Our story begins in 58 BC. Gaius Julius Caesar, a brilliant but debt-ridden politician, secures the governorship of two Roman provinces, Cisalpine Gaul, which is modern-day northern Italy, and along the Adriatic coast. Crucially, he also gets command of Transalpine Gaul, a sliver of Roman territory in what is now southern France. This was his launchpad. Caesar wasn't content with just administering provinces. He saw an opportunity for military glory, or gloria, and the immense wealth that came with it. This was his ticket to the top of Roman politics. To the north lay Gaul, a vast territory inhabited by hundreds of Celtic and Germanic tribes. They were formidable warriors, but they were also deeply divided, a fact Caesar would exploit with ruthless efficiency. The spark that lit the flame came from the Helvetii, a large tribe from modern-day Switzerland. Feeling pressured by migrating Germanic tribes, they decided to move their entire population, over 300,000 people, across Gaul to the Atlantic coast. Their path led them straight through Roman territory. Caesar saw his chance, portraying this migration as a direct threat to Rome. He raised his legions and marched to intercept them. Near the town of Bibracte, Caesar's disciplined army crushed the Helvetii. It was a brutal, bloody affair, but it sent a clear message to all of Gaul. A new power had arrived. Caesar wasn't just defending borders. He was on the offensive. With the Helvetii dealt with other Gallic tribes, impressed and intimidated, began asking for Caesar's help. A coalition of Gauls requested his aid against Ariovist, a powerful Germanic king who had crossed the Rhine River and was terrorizing them. Caesar agreed, but his motives were his own. This was a perfect excuse to push his legions deeper into Gaul. The confrontation with Ariovistus was a tense standoff. At one point, Caesar's own soldiers were on the verge of mutiny, terrified of the fierce Germanic warriors. Caesar delivered one of his most famous speeches, shaming and inspiring them. He declared he would march on with only his loyal 10th Legion if he had to. His words worked. The army's morale soared, and in the ensuing battle, they utterly defeated Ariovistus's forces, driving the Germans back across the Rhine. Caesar had now established himself as the arbiter of Gaul. Over the next few years, Caesar methodically subdued one tribe after another. In the north, he faced the Belgae, the confederation of tribes. Caesar himself described as the bravest of all the Gauls. In a massive engagement at the Savis River, the Romans were nearly overwhelmed by a surprise attack. The situation was desperate. Caesar himself grabbed a shield and plunged into the front lines, his personal bravery rallying his men and turning the tide of the battle. It was a near disaster that turned into a stunning victory, showcasing the resilience of the Roman legions and the importance of leadership under fire. Caesar's military genius wasn't just about battlefield tactics. He was a master of engineering and logistics. When he needed to cross the Rhine to intimidate the German tribes, his engineers built a massive wooden bridge over the powerful river in just 10 days. It was an incredible feat that left the Germans in awe. He crossed, made a show of force, and then dismantled the bridge, demonstrating that Roman power could reach anywhere. He even launched 2 expeditions to Britain, a land of myth and mystery to the Romans. While these invasions didn't lead to a permanent conquest, they were a huge propaganda victory back in Rome, adding to his growing legend. But the Gauls were not so easily broken. In the winter of 54 to 53 BC, while Caesar's legions were spread out in winter camps, a coordinated uprising began, led by Ambiorix of the Eburones tribe. The rebels used deception to lure a Roman legion and 5 cohorts out of their fortress and annihilated them in an ambush. It was one of Rome's worst defeats in the war. The rebellion spread like wildfire, and another Roman camp, commanded by Quintus Cicero, brother of the famous orator, was besieged. For weeks, Cicero's men held out against overwhelming odds. The situation was critical. A Gallic messenger, a loyal servant, managed to sneak through enemy lines with a message for Caesar speared to a javelin. Upon receiving the news, Caesar immediately marched his legions with incredible speed, covering nearly 100 miles in just a few days, and arrived just in time to save the beleaguered garrison. The brutal suppression of this revolt should have been the end, but it was only the beginning of the final, epic chapter of the Gallic Wars. In 52 BC, a new leader emerged, one who would finally unite the fractious Gallic tribes. A charismatic nobleman from the Arverni tribe, Vercingetorix, understood that facing the Romans in open battle was suicide. He convinced the Gauls to adopt a scorched earth policy, burn their own towns and farms to deny the Roman army supplies. It was a brutal strategy, but it began to work. Caesar's legions, masters of logistics, suddenly found themselves starving. The climax of the war came at the hilltop fortress of Alesia. Vercingetorix and his main army of 80,000 warriors made their stand there, believing the position to be impregnable. Caesar, arriving with his army, faced a daunting challenge. He decided to besiege the fortress. But this was no ordinary siege. Knowing that a massive Gallic relief army would soon arrive, Caesar ordered his men to build an unprecedented set of fortifications. They constructed 2 massive walls. The first, an 11-mile wall of circumvallation, faced inwards to trap Vercingetorix inside Alesia. The second, a 30-mile wall of contravallation, faced outwards to protect the Romans from the coming relief force. It was an engineering marvel, complete with towers, ditches, and hidden traps like sharpened stakes, known as lilies. Soon enough, a colossal Gallic relief army, perhaps 250,000 strong, arrived. Caesar's 50,000 men were now trapped between 2 enemy forces. The final battle was a desperate, multi-front struggle. While the relief army assaulted the outer wall, Vercingetorix's forces sallied out from Alesia to attack the inner wall. The Romans were stretched to their breaking point. At the moment of crisis, Caesar once again led a cavalry charge in person, his scarlet cloak making him an unmistakable target and an inspiration. His timely intervention broke the Gallic attack, causing the relief army to panic and flee. Seeing that all hope was lost, Vercingetorix surrendered the next day in a dramatic ceremony, throwing his weapons at Caesar's feet. The Gallic Wars were effectively over. The conquest of Gaul was complete. An estimated 1 million Gauls had been killed and another million enslaved. The wealth Caesar plundered was immense, enough to pay off his debts and buy the loyalty of his soldiers and political allies in Rome. His legions were now the most experienced and loyal fighting force in the world. He had chronicled his own achievements in his commentaries on the Gallic War, a masterpiece of political propaganda that ensured his version of events became the definitive history. This campaign transformed Caesar from a mere politician into the most powerful man in Rome, setting the stage for the civil war that would follow, the end of the Roman Republic, and the birth of the Roman Empire. The conquest of Gaul was not just a military campaign, it was the crucible that forged an empire in the legend of Julius Caesar. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Caesar's strategies and conquests, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more epic stories from the ancient world. Let me know in the comments which historical campaign you'd like to see covered next. Until then, stay curious.